name is Sada Mohammed. I work with PowerShift Africa as a climate finance expert, and I will be the moderator for this session. So this session brings together key stakeholders to discuss how Africa Development Bank financing mechanisms can unlock Africa's renewable energy potential, foster just transition, and also enhance climate resilience. So this discussion is indeed very timely given the shifting geopolitical context. And it aligns well with the theme of this annual meeting, which is about making Africa's capital work better for Africa. So we'll have an opportunity to hear from different perspectives from these panelists, representing different stakeholders, ranging from civil society organization and also development partners. But first, I would like us to start with an icebreaker video, which can play now.
600 millions of us in the dark? Unacceptable. A future dictated by others? Not in our name. We're flipping the switch. We're rewriting our own energy destiny. From scarcity to abundance. From dependency to self-reliance. WhatsApp Africa is here. Igniting a movement for 100% clean, homegrown energy. By Africans, for Africans. Sun blazing from the Sahara to the Kalahari, powering homes, businesses, and futures. Winds sweeping across the Rift Valley, turning potential into prosperity. Rivers holding untapped power, electrifying cities and villages. This is our energy, our resources, our revolution. No false solutions, no one left behind, just real renewable power. Shared, sustained, and unstoppable. The future isn't just bright, it's African. The question isn't if we'll shine, it's how bright, how far, and who's coming with us. Let's WhatsApp Africa, powering change, energizing a continent.
Thank you very much. So after that powerful video, I think we're gonna start now. At this point, I would like to just explain the structure of this panel. So we'll start with the first round for the panelists to give their official opening remarks for 5 minutes. Then we'll go into the first round of questions. After that, I'll give the floor for a Q&A session for anyone who might want to ask question, and then we'll proceed from there. So let me introduce the panelists now. We have a very powerful panelist here. So I'll start with my immediate left. Is Miss Jacqueline Mwende Kimeu, who is an energy expert from Christian Aid. We have Dr. Issa Faye, who is the Director General for Global Practices and Partnership from the Islamic Development Bank. We have Dr. Anye Gebel, who is the Policy Advisor on Development, Banks and Climate from German Watch. Then we have Mr. Kioli, who is an adaptation expert from Kenya Climate Change Working Group. And we have Ms. Karabo Makonyana, who is a renewable energy and just transition campaigner from PowerShift Africa. So at this point, I'll welcome Ms. Jackie to please provide us with your brief opening remarks. And please remember you have each 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much again for the introduction. I work with Christian Aid as a climate change and energy advisor, and I'm really glad to be here today to participate in these important panel discussions around how catalytic role of AfDB in accelerating financing for Africa. And maybe to start with painting the picture, I know this will also form a basis for our discussion today. We are asking the questions, where is the money going? We still have close to 600 million people without access to electricity, and we also have close to 907 million people without access to clean cooking. So one question that we are asking ourselves is, where is the money going? And also, why are we still stuck? Despite the lots of financing that is going to Africa, why are our people still cooking with dirty fuels? And what can we do? How do we accelerate the role of decentralized energy systems to unlock the power of renewable energy across Africa? So welcome to these discussions. I'm looking forward to further discussions around the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jackie. Next, we can have Dr. Issa.
Thank you very much, moderator, and good morning, everyone. Just starting by thanking the organizers and African Development Bank for having us here today. I mean, from the Islamic Development Bank perspective, I would like to take a step back and put things in perspective. Why do we really care about climate finance and just transition? When you look at our constituencies, 33 out of 57 member countries are fragile. And on top of that, they have been really hit hard by the poly crisis. I mean, manifested through high energy prices, inflation, food prices, and so on. And this has been having a really negative effect on the stance, or the fiscal stance of those countries, as well as on the sustainability, that sustainability situation. And then on top of that, you add climate crisis and climate effects that have been putting a lot of more pressure on the resources that are limited. So there is a huge issue in terms of fiscal space and ability to service the debt in many of our member countries that are low-income countries. And despite all of that, those countries are having difficulty to access capital market or to get financing at affordable terms. And this is the main issue we're grappling with in the bank. How can we mobilize concessional financing to support our member countries in fighting and wrestling with climate financing? This is one of the issues that we have. Therefore, at the Islamic Development Bank, mobilizing concessional financing is an imperative. We don't have no choice because of the member countries that we are serving. We need to bring concessional financing to be able to support them. And this is why in the bank we are putting together a concessional financing window. It has been approved last week by our Board of Governors, so we're going to get a concessional window a la IDA. It's something that will provide really concessional financing money. Our strategy also, the new strategy, is putting resilience and climate financing at its core. And last but not least, we have an action plan, a climate action plan, and just transition, which is really revolved around two interlocking pillars. One on focusing on people, jobs creation, skills, and social protection, and then the second one looking at transition, which is making sure our assets are green. So this is where we are at now, and just to put the perspective and why do we care and why we are very interested to be part of this conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Issa, for those useful remarks. So we'll go to Dr. Anya Gebel to give her remarks. Thanks.
Thank you. Does this work? All right. Yes, hello. Thank you for having me. My name is Anya Gebel, and I work for German Watch as a policy advisor on development banks and climate. For the past 4 years, we have accompanied the Paris alignment process of the AfDB's with research input and recommendations. And since last year, we're also working on the question of the COP28 energy consensus, which is very closely related to those questions of the Mission 300 and the energy access. And we're trying to look at what is the contribution that the multilateral development banks can make to fulfill this consensus. And I would just like to remind everyone of what was decided in Dubai at the COP28, because many of those countries who decided on this are shareholders of the African Development Bank. So the countries under this energy package agreed to contribute to transitioning away from fossil fuels in energy systems in a just, orderly, and equitable manner, accelerating action so as to achieve net zero by 2050. Also, at a global scale, they decided on a tripling of renewable energy capacity and a doubling of energy efficiency improvements by 2030, while at the same time laying the ground for a swift, just, and equitable transition, underpinned by deep emissions cuts and scaled-up finance. So this was the commitment that was made in Dubai, and financially and in numbers, this means that we will need to get to 11,000 gigawatts of total capacity of renewables by 2030. And on doubling efficiency improvements from 2% to 4% by 2030. And also we need lots of investments in connected technologies to make this scaling up of renewables possible in the first place. So we need grids, flexibility measures, and energy conservation measures, and this will lead us to cumulative investments of 31.5 trillion US dollar until 2030. And this still excludes the costs for retiring fossil fuel infrastructure and for ensuring that the social costs for societies don't outweigh the benefits. But of course, there's different problems to fulfilling this, this agreement. The investments in renewables are happening, but they're much too few and too small. We see that the demand for all energy sources worldwide keeps rising, and clean energy covered only about a third of energy demand growth, and the rest was covered by fossil fuels. We also see a concentration of investments in China, North Africa, and Europe, and only 7 to 5% actually go to LMICs. And Sub-Saharan Africa, despite having 60% of the best solar resources globally and huge investment opportunities, is receiving only 1% of the globally installed solar PV capacity in 2022. And we look at what the AfDB's do at the moment. We see that Sub-Saharan Africa is receiving the second smallest per capita amounts of AfDB renewable financing. Central Europe and Western Europe is receiving the bulk due to the financial firepower of the EIB. And this is despite the fact that there is a massive need to catch up on energy access, and many people could actually leapfrog directly to clean energy. And we also see that the shares of technical assistance as part of the AfDB's renewable financing are exceptionally low for Sub-Saharan Africa and the MENA region compared to other world regions, while we see that there are huge assistance needs, and some countries need support to even identify and voice their investment needs in the first place. And this is why already technical assistance is very low share of the overall financing for renewables. So this COP28 energy consensus is now a commitment that was made by shareholders, and it requires the AfDB's to ramp up the efforts to increase renewables. And we have some recommendations developed in this regard, which I can maybe share a bit later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anya. So I move to Mr. John Kioli to give his opening remarks. Thank you.
Since agrarian revolution, since the Industrial Revolution, Africa has been subjected to 96% of the emissions, and we are only responsible for 4%. You notice that the Horn of Africa is suffering from floods, is suffering from a lot of atrocities of climate change. When you look at Sahel region, the desert, the famine is increasing every day. You saw what happened to Malawi, Mozambique, about the floods, yet we are not responsible. Yet our vulnerability level is too low. Yet we cannot have the enough funds to manage the atrocities that are happening to Africa. I think we need to start thinking about adaptation as a priority. We need to fine-tune our funding to meet the demands that we signed off in 2015 in Paris, that our nationally determined contribution shall be funded through a mechanism that has never been honored. It has never been honored, and now most of the countries have their third NDC, nationally determined contribution. We don't know where that money will come. Most of the countries could only pay for about 15% of the cost. We have a problem. My name is John Kioli, the chair of Kenya Climate Change Working Group. We are based in Kenya. We are every day looking at what are those policy gaps that we have that we can be able to manage. We can be able to jumpstart to deal with issues of climate change. We're also looking at the last mile in terms of what we call unbankable projects. Those projects that will need only a solar lantern and their lives will move on. Our mothers can be able to light, even to do homework for their grandchildren, and even to light their houses and avoid the expenses of healthcare, avoid issues that they have to buy medicine every now and then because of the kind of electricity, kind of power they're using, and what kind of lighting they are subjected to. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored today as Climate Change Working Group to be invited to this very important meeting that we are talking about issues of energy and finance. It is a priority, and adaptation is indeed a priority. Looking at only 15 to 20% is going to finance about adaptation, and only 10% reaches the last mile. That's our agenda today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kioli. So we'll have Karabo to give her remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll spend my opening remarks basically speaking about the video that you saw. So I am the convener of that very same campaign called WhatsApp Africa. And what we are basically trying to do is to humanize the conversation on just transitions and energy access. We don't want to just speak about the conversation from an investment and an abstract and an infrastructure perspective. To give perspective to all of this, it's all about people. It's all about African people. So we need to really humanize the conversation on just transitions. And just transitions are not just about keeping the lights on or having the stove on. It's on the African continent, it truly means job creation, economic development, amplifying some of the needs related to education and health, green industrialization and giving perspective into that. But more importantly, mitigating the impacts that our people get to experience on a daily basis related to climate change. So it's really all about livelihoods and sustainable development for people on this continent rather than just energy access. And don't get me wrong, energy access is crucial when it comes to just transition. So this campaign, like I'm saying, it's to humanize the conversation, but to also just speak about certain things that we need clarified. Where is this money coming from, considering the low percentage of investment towards clean energy on the African continent? How do we get political will? How do we get our leaders to start speaking about this conversation from a climate finance perspective? But also things like how do we amplify African community voices? The just transition conversation feels like something that has been imposed on us. It's time to own this conversation. So how do we get our people to start owning the narratives of what a just African transition actually really looks like? And through this campaign, we're also trying to get to a point whereby we are interrogating the modeling that we are seeing with just transitions and trying to figure out some of the things that we do not want to see, but also some of the things that we would like to actually see. And I'll just say a few of them. We do not want to see debt-inducing models. I think the continent is already debt-distressed. We also don't want to see neo-colonial, exploitative, export-orientated models whereby the very energy systems that we are developing are generated here and shipped to the global north, but doesn't really even benefit our own people as is. We also don't want energy systems that perpetuate the same cycles we've seen with the fossil fuel industry, where there's mass human rights violations. We still do not want to see harms happening within our communities. But also, we want to mitigate the prioritization of profits or benefit for a minority at the expense of the bigger majority. We want to see community-centered renewable energy systems that do not harm our people, that equally capitalize our economies, that build our economies by capitalizing on our critical minerals, on our labor force, but also on the climate that we have on this continent. And this campaign really just tries to humanize and give perspective and Africanize this conversation on just transitions and give context as to what does it mean for us.
Thank you very much, Karabo, for those powerful remarks. So at this point, I will go to the first round of questions, and I would like to pose the first one to Ms. Jacqueline. So with Africa's energy mix still at 70% reliant on fossil fuels, what role can AfDB play in accelerating renewable energy deployment at scale while safeguarding energy access and affordability for all?
Thank you very much for that question. And also to start by appreciating what the bank has done. Currently, we just saw the launch of the Africa strategy for the next 10 years, that is 2024 to 2033. And in this strategy, the bank is looking at powering 250 million people and also providing clean cooking access to around 150 million Africans. That is a good step in the right direction, and we encourage and applaud that. However, there are some other issues that needs to be looked at. With the financing, as you have just alluded to, we need to have innovative financing mechanisms if we want to get 100% universal energy access by 2033. And one thing that we see is very crucial for the bank. Of course, they have done a lot of work in the lens of DRE, but more needs to be done. Yesterday or day before, we saw a discussion around the SAFER Fund, Sustainable Energy Access Fund for AfDB, that is supplying close to 40% of the financing to energy. That is good, but we need to have a dedicated DRE facility that really, if we want to really implement or achieve the targets that have been set by the bank for 150 people to have access to electricity. So currently we don't have a dedicated DRE financing mechanism, and I think that is one of the things that the bank needs to focus on. Secondly, I want to talk about in the lens of innovative financing, I want to talk about the diaspora resources or investment. Last year alone, Africa mobilized close to 95 billion USD, from the Africans in the diaspora. Going to Kenya alone, we were able to mobilize close to 4.5 billion USD. But these resources are going to other, sectors, for housing and others. So I think the bank has a role to play in terms of ensuring that, or working with other stakeholders to tap into this opportunity and ensure that this money goes also to finance renewable energy projects, and for that matter, looking at community-led renewable energy systems. So that is also something that we see as very critical for us. Again, we have seen what the bank has been able to do, and also borrowing from what Karaba has said. If we want to deliver universal energy access, then debt is not an option. Currently in Africa, we are seeing that debt repayment is actually combined 50% of the money that is going to, for example, education, health, and social protection schemes. So we are saying that yes, the bank can deliver DRE or other universal energy access, but that should not come in the form of loans to African countries, because that we see that is a very key gap. Then also building on that, I see a lot of opportunity in terms of the bank strengthening the regional power pools. Currently we have 4 of them, the East Africa, Southern Africa, West Africa power pools. But this needs to be more, looked into, because if rectified, then we will be able to reduce the cost of electricity for our people. We'll also be able to reduce the cost of, make energy more reliable, and also improve the issues of security. Yeah, so maybe I can stop at that, and also to point out that for the bank, we need to redirect fossil fuels financing. When you look at the subsidies that are going to fossil fuels, that is quite huge. How about rechanneling that to energy access, to renewable energy? That will really deliver, energy access, and I think that is one of the solutions to really bridge the missing gap when it comes to energy access for the Africans. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So just building on that, I think it's important for us to also understand the urgency of just energy transition in Africa. Now the question to Karabo is, what are the most critical policy or financial interventions that AfDB should prioritize to ensure that local communities, especially youth and women, are not left behind and they are at the center of this conversation?
Thank you so much. There's only really one, particularly with the urgency that we are talking about. It is the FDB needs to prioritize decentralized renewable energy investments. That's going to be critical, particularly if we're talking about 600 million people who don't have access to energy. Decentralized energy systems, whether it's off-grids or mini-grid solutions, have shown that they are the best in terms of the timelines in which they take to get these solutions to people, but they also really are the best in terms of getting to underserved regions within the continent. But I just want to speak about then how is it that we make the decentralized renewable energy systems effective? And there's two groups I want to speak about. So from a financial intervention perspective, the FDB needs to enable financial access for local actors. Just transitions have the risk of, again, duplicating the exploitative models that we've seen previously. We do need to really create an enabling environment for local actors to access financing, and this could be done by partnering with microfinance institutions or impact investors to ensure that even women and youth energy enterprises actually do have access to financing, again, that is not in the form of debt. But also we need to have targeted grants and concessional finance that helps with de-risking community-led projects, but also financing that these women or youth-led or youth-owned, hopefully more owned than led, enterprises actually really do get to access. At a policy level, I think there's just so many policy examples that could come to play. I'm just going to mention three. The first one relates to supporting governments to have inclusive and intersectional energy policies, so national energy policies. A lot of the work and a lot is done at a national level. So it's so important for the AfDB to be able to provide some level of support, whether it's technical support, for governments to ensure that their policy landscape creates that enabling environment for local communities to access these things. The second one relates to social protection. So we can't speak about just transitions blanketly without speaking about the social protections and reskilling that needs to happen. The reality is that fossil fuels are a thing on the continent. And if we're going to speak about just transitioning, we need to make sure it is in line with the current system and social protections to ensure that we're preventing economic displacement needs to be put into place. And the last one just relates to capacity building, so technical training or entrepreneurship for women and youth-owned enterprises are going to be important, and I think the bank has already put forward a lot of resources there, perhaps channeling it into the energy sector, but at the heart of it is really decentralized renewable energy investments, and that's how we get the most energy to people on the continent in the fastest way, but also in the most effective way while building local economic development.
Thank you, Karabo, for that intervention. So I move now to Dr. Anya. Now we all know that the Mission 300 is one of the flagship projects that AfDB is doing with the World Bank, and we also have the COP28 energy consensus around energy transition. So how does the AfDB leverage on these two to demonstrate global leadership among the MDBs on climate resilient and low carbon financing?
Yes, thank you. So I think a lot of the things that are important for Mission 300 were already mentioned. So I'm just going to add a few maybe, so that, for example, it's really important that the bank rules out gas or any other fossil fuels for the Mission 300, because gas feeds the climate crisis and such investments will become stranded assets in the near future. And we all know that renewables are cheaper, more stable, and faster to construct and create more jobs. So for the bank, there is really no economic or development case to be made for including fossils in the Mission 300. Then on debt, this has already been mentioned, and we see that the Mission 300 mentions concessional financing among other instruments, but many African countries are so heavily indebted that also concessional financing can exacerbate their debt problems. So it's really crucial that Mission 300's financial mechanisms are tailored to the country's fiscal and debt situations, and that also non-debt instruments are provided. Then we're seeing that for Mission 300, there is a lot of emphasis on the private sector. I've just attended an event on it this morning where this was re-emphasized. And on supporting the private investments in energy utilities through, for example, risk mitigation instruments, but also through the corporatization and privatization of energy utilities. And we think that a lot of caution should be exerted in this regard. While a well-regulated privatization of, for example, electricity generation may be sometimes a good strategy, some critical factors really need to be observed, such as, for example, that essential infrastructure, such as grids for distribution and transmission, really must remain under public control, that at the same time, really strong regulatory oversight is being built up and supported, and including to ensure that energy remains affordable and inclusive, and also that local companies that provide tailored solutions, especially for marginalized communities, should be prioritized and supported. So this is really important to actually ensure equitable access and to avoid that private monopolies are created, and also to ensure that that energy access is delivered to the people most in need. And this is something that's really crucial and that we should really look at when the Mission 300 is being implemented. For the COP28 energy package, a lot of things, similar things are valid as for the Mission 300, namely that distributed off-grid and community-centered renewable solutions should be prioritized for energy access so that they can actually make half of the new electricity in 2030. But for a sustainable and long-term energy transition, it is really important to also couple those efforts with support for the building of green value chains within Africa, which is also something that the AfDB is obviously already working on. So for example, in battery storage, in solar, wind, geothermal tech manufacturing, and installation in manufacturing of energy efficient devices and so on. So the green industrialization needs to be spurred, and this is immensely important also for the justice aspects of the transition, because only if there are really good alternatives to fossil development, the transition will be socially viable and accepted. So more concretely, this means that the African Development Bank should support countries in developing far-sighted green industrial strategies, regulatory frameworks, and labor market policies that are supportive of the green industrialization. It needs to support countries in coordinating strategies regionally and in leveraging and enhancing local industrial capacities, also in doing education and training programs and research and development in this area. And they need to help countries build regional supply hubs for clean energy equipment, for example, for batteries, to reduce the dependence from imports of infrastructure and technologies. That has already been mentioned. And this is very closely related to the regional integration efforts that the AfDB is already undertaking. So to support regional energy integration, including cross-border power pools and power trade enabled by respective infrastructure is really important. And some very concrete institutional measures that the AfDB could actually implement very quickly to support this endeavor is to adopt effective KPIs in this regard. So the AfDB has KPIs on renewable support and on decarbonization, but some other banks have also interesting new KPIs that could be applied to the AfDB as well. So for example, for cross-border renewable power trade, for revised policy frameworks for renewables, for improved governance of energy utilities for renewables, and for improved corporate energy governance by private sector clients. So such key performance indexes for the bank could actually maybe aid the effective pursuit of such targets. And of course, it would also be very helpful to support the partner countries to include similar, clear, quantifiable renewable capacity targets in their NDCs and in their long-term strategies.
Thank you very much, Dr. Annie, for that. So I'll move to Dr. Issa. As also one of the multilateral development banks, what do you think AfDB can also learn from the Islamic Development Bank in terms of mobilizing consensual as well as innovative finance for climate action as well as just transition? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Look, in terms of learning, I think that we've been working with the African Development Bank for quite some time now. And we've been co-financing and working in the sector of agriculture, food security, energy, transport, and you name it. So there is already a mutual learning exercise happening between us and for a long time. What I would like to put the stress on today is what we are doing in the bank and then how it can be a source of inspiration for all of us. What did we do? We started by setting very ambitious targets. We're talking about KPIs. We have very ambitious target in terms of climate finance, and it was set at 35% of climate finance in all our approval by 2024. What happened is that we beat that target 1 year ahead of schedule, and we are now at 46% of climate finance in 2025. And guess what? 51% of that climate financing is for adaptation. And this climate financing is worth 2.4 billion from our books. So this is really remarkable, and this is at par with what African Development Bank is doing in that space. I think that we are the two MDBs that are really leading in terms of climate adaptation financing. Now, how do we do that? Well, the approach that we have at the bank is that we need to leverage and we blend. These are the two approaches we use blending and leveraging, making sure that we mobilize capital for climate financing. And we mobilized, last year we mobilized $5.5 billion from the philanthropics. We work with Bill and Melinda Gates, for example. We work with partners like the GCF, the Green Climate Financing, and then other partners. That has helped us really leverage financing and concessional money that is using for climate. But what we've learned also is that if you want to mobilize, you need to have a dedicated vehicle, a blended finance vehicle that helps you really mobilize more financing. We have what we call the LLF Life and Livelihood Fund in the bank that is pooling grant money with our ordinary capital. And by blending those, we've been able to provide concessional financing. And this gives you like terms similar to the IDA for low-income countries. And this has been really successful in the bank, and then we're trying to scale it going forward. And as I mentioned earlier, we're putting in place a concessional financing window. This is going to be really focusing in delivering on climate and other challenges in development countries in a more systematic manner. One other thing that we've done is that we went to the capital market. Actually, we went to the capital market to issue sukuk. Sukuk is the Islamic bond, and we have been issuing green and sustainable sukuk, and that has helped us really provide the concessional financing. And the sukuk, as you know, is asset-backed, so it can be issued in local currency, so countries that have forex challenges can really leverage sukuk, the Islamic bond, to fund some of the challenges in Islamic finance. Now, in terms of the just transition, and then this is where I joined Karabo's point on humanizing the transition. For us, it revolves around 2 points that I made earlier. The first point is the people. We need to invest in the people, because the transition that needs to happen, that greening and decarbonization, should come with really investing in our people. How are we going to do that? We need to provide them for safety nets, social safety net. We need to make sure that there is a job creation from that transition. We need to create green jobs. We need to reskill or upskill our people to make sure that they can really weather this transition. And then inclusion is something that we're working on in many different ways. The second point is on transition. Transitioning means for us really supporting green infrastructure. We are an infrastructure bank, and we're trying to make sure that our infrastructure is green. How do we deliver those things? We have different mechanisms. We make sure, policy dialogue, the country dialogue, we make sure that the discussion is focusing on strategically positioning climate finance and just transition. We use also a South-South cooperation mechanism that we have in the bank to make sure that we learn from each other, from different parts of the bank. And then, last but not least, the Sharia-compliant instruments that we have in the bank is something that we use. Now, I will finish with the Mission 300. I would just like to acknowledge that we are part of the journey. We have pledged $2.6 billion to Mission 300 in January. So the Islamic Development Bank has joined the forces with the World Bank and the African Development to deliver into this. And we believe that we can bring in Islamic finance innovation to support Mission 300. And this is through our structuring Islamic finance for Sahel, for example, and the North Africa grid. There is work that we are doing right now to support them. 2 weeks back, I had a meeting with the World Bank M300 discussion, and we are working on the compact to make sure that we can deliver together on these ones. And we are also providing, we will be providing Sharia-compliant guarantee to crowd in more investors into that. In a nutshell, we think that with the experience of the African Development Bank, our expertise in Islamic finance, in deploying our Sharia-compliant instrument, we can unlock affordable financing, and not only that, build the trust that is important to make sure that we can provide climate resilience for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those interventions. So that gets me now to Mr. Kioli. We already know there is increasing climate risks, especially across the African continent, and adaptation is lagging behind. So what do you think are the gaps in current adaptation planning, action, and finance flow? And how can MDBs, especially Africa Development Bank, can come in to address these gaps?
Thank you very much. I think there are 3 dimensions. One is we require around 52.7 billion annually for the next 4 years to manage our adaptation, requirement for Africa. This is not little money, and I'm happy because organizations like AfDB are working towards that. What we need is to look at what are the mechanisms in place that can be calibrated to fit in issues of adaptation. And even adaptation itself, we need to look at it with some sort of equity lens, with some sort of justice lens, and think about what we call unbankable projects, because that's where the rubber meets the road. Most of the money probably is crafted in a way that it will go to governments, it will go to big organizations, and that leaves the last mile. Every dollar that is invested in last mile can be return of investment 10 times more than a dollar that is given to a big farm. So we need to look at what does the private sector bring on board? What does the civil society bring on board? And specifically look at amplification of what the civil society have been doing. Do not ignore these projects, because what you need is to amplify them. You need to replicate them, because what they need, they have already reached a level that they have proven that these are working. So amplify these projects, and also de-risk what you call unbankable projects. Put some insurance so that then they are seen from a different perspective. They are not seen like a bother Every time we write proposals as civil society, oh, this is too risky. De-risk that risk so that that money can go to the communities at the last mile. Second thing, we know that most of all the countries have their own national adaptation plans. Actually, they have already costed them, but they don't have money. That's a fact. They don't have money to manage their plans. So look at those adaptation plans. Those are ready, plug and play. Fund them. Finally, Mission 300 is a very, very good thing. And it's going to bridge the gap of electricity by giving 300 million more people to get electricity. Our children are going to have vaccines refrigerated. Our women are going to deliver with dignity. We are going to have access to medical care in a dignified way in Africa. But we need to see if we can put a pillar of adaptation in that Mission 300, so that then we can reach the threshold that we need of 50% adaptation, 50% mitigation. It is always easy to fund mitigation, but it's always better to fund adaptation because we are suffering as Africans. And we cannot wait for us to plant trees to be able to get those carbon emissions taken away. We are suffering. We don't have food. We don't have water. We need immediate actions. And that's where adaptation bridges that gap. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kioli, for those remarks. I think the point is very clear. We cannot have an energy just transition while leaving adaptation and resilience building behind. They have to go hand in hand. So at this point, I would like to invite, if there is any questions from the floor for the panelists, kindly raise your hand. The mics will come to you. And also mention who you want the question to answer the question. Thanks.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to ask my questions. The question is for the panel, in particular, Dr. Anya. Am I correct the name? Let's humanize the conversation. I really like that. So I'm an Ivorian. I'm also an energy expert. We advising governments, public and private sectors on key infrastructure energy projects. And so there's a lot to do about, when it comes to the energy, there's a lot to do about planning. And I am still puzzled when I hear certain remarks in relation to we need to rule out fossil fuels, including natural gas. And I'd like to see the studies. I'd like to see the studies that demonstrate to which extent natural gas, for instance, in Africa, is not a good idea for a just and fair energy transition. I'd like to see the studies. To which extent natural gas development doesn't bring jobs, doesn't create valuable jobs for the economy and for the youth in this continent. I see many countries burning gas as we speak and not being able to monetize it because they don't have the financing and the planning capabilities to deal with it. So as we're having those conversations here, let's humanize it. I was in Congo recently, and I'm looking around, and I see gas flaring everywhere around me. And I see a country that really tries to have a strategy, a gas strategy, that says, the guy, the restaurant I was having food was burning diesel, and it was so smelly. Let's humanize the conversation. And right in front of him, gas flaring was happening. There's another country which I know, not too far from here. They managed to develop their natural gas fields, and guess what? It is being exported. Liquefied natural gas is being exported from their shores to where? To Europe. Let's humanize the conversation. And while they're doing this, there is a power barge working on fuel, burning it to power that same country that is exporting natural gas. And let's humanize it. Yeah, this is the kind of things that I want to see the studies that shows that it's such a bad idea to help those countries monetize the natural gas. So when you allow countries to do that, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I know, and I'll be brief on that, it does create jobs. Because natural gas is not oil. If you develop it, right here in Côte d'Ivoire, for instance, there's numbers of companies who are able to put a pipeline together. There is the logistic basis that is going to hire hundreds of people. You've got all the logistic chain and the local content, thanks to the law that we have, that requires energy company and oil company to deal and to hire local companies and people. And they are lacking precisely the kind of financing that they need to grab those markets and to develop them. So I want to see the studies. I'd like to come and see you after that. So you give me the studies that will convince me that there is absolutely no case for the bank, the African Development Bank, to help Africa monetize its natural gas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next question. Please make it brief so that we have enough time for getting responses.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you very much. This has been very insightful. My name is Ruth Rensburg. I'm from Uniting to Combat Neglected Tropical Diseases. In the beginning of May, we were with the African Union and we asked AU entity program managers, how many of you have been involved in climate change planning within your country? And the answer was 0. I think the question that you asked was, to what extent can the AfDB, can the Islamic Development Bank and others play an important role? And the answer is, we need coordination. We need to sit around the same table and say that at the end of the last mile, where the power is off, the poverty is high, and the disease is great. We do not have the luxury of having separate conversations, separate initiatives for people who are getting poorer. So the question to the panel is, how can we improve coordination to address the needs of people at the end of the last mile? Thank you.
Thank you.
So my name is Kenneth from Can International and also ABB Suma Foundation. I have 2 questions. I think ADB is promoting the cook stove because of the carbon market. That is what I believe, and the research shows. They are eating on behalf of the poor. And as we stand and also say, gas is not just. We just need a just energy transition for clean energy for Africa. We don't need gas to survive, and also create employment for other groups to benefit from it. So for me, I can share a little research which shows that gas will not benefit Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Please make it quick.
Bonjour à tous, je suis Jean-Jacques, je suis secrétaire général de la Fondation et la FISU, sachant que pour nous, notre priorité, c'est plus les communautés dans les villages. Je suis de la Côte d'Ivoire. Donc, sachant qu'au niveau des communautés, on parle de changement climatique, adaptation, tout cet état de fait, mais rien n'est fait au niveau de nos communautés. Parce qu'aujourd'hui, nos communautés vivent dans des zones un peu reculées, puis un peu difficiles. Quand la Banque africaine de développement n'essaie pas aussi de pouvoir impliquer la société civile dans ses actions, même quand la banque y fait beaucoup pour notre pays qui est la Côte d'Ivoire, mais nous ne ressentons pas ça aussi au niveau des communautés de base, au niveau des villages. Donc nous nous accentuons plus au niveau des villages. Donc c'est pour dire au niveau de la collaboration entre la banque et puis la société civile, surtout ceux qui mènent beaucoup d'actions au niveau des communautés, qu'elles puissent revoir cela. Dans le cadre des financements, nous avons financé sous fonds propres des agriculteurs en leur donnant des intrants agricoles. Mais au niveau des agriculteurs, quand nous sommes allés sur le terrain, ils disent qu'ils avaient des difficultés parce qu'il n'y avait pas de points d'eau pour pouvoir alimenter leur culture, surtout la culture de la tomate. Donc, dû au point d'eau qui est difficile pour ces agriculteurs-là, ils étaient obligés de se déplacer pour aller dans d'autres villes environnantes, où ils disent qu'il y a beaucoup de charges à payer au niveau des loyers, et puis il y a des difficultés encore au niveau du fait qu'ils se déplacent dans d'autres communautés. Donc, pour eux, ils disent si on pourrait faire des forages d'eau pour eux, donc nous sommes en train de voir mener, chercher encore des fonds pour pouvoir faire des forages d'eau pour que ces populations puissent rester sur place. Donc, il faut que la banque aussi puisse y penser, intégrer la société civile dans ses actions. Merci.
Thank you. Please make it brief. Help me move the mic.
Hi everyone. It's a quick one. I just want to have your point of view if it's fair for Africa to be kind of compelled to just transition when the Western countries have based their development on high CO2 emissions and have now over like centuries and have now generated that much profits which can help them to accelerate their own just transition and help like continents like as Africa to have its own development. So it was just a point of view from your side. Thank you.
Thank you. Behind. Let's get responses and then we'll go a second round. Please. Thank you.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Jean-Baptiste Tignégré. Je suis le représentant de la Fondation africaine pour les technologies agricoles pour l'Afrique de l'Ouest. Je suis basé au Nigeria, mais burkinabé. Donc, je serai très bref. C'est juste un plaidoyer pour attirer votre attention sur la nécessité d'investir encore plus dans le domaine agricole. On a tantôt parlé d'adaptation. Parlant d'adaptation, je dois dire que nos stations de recherche ont beaucoup de technologies développées qui existent et qui peuvent aider à résoudre les questions d'adaptation climatique. Par exemple, au Nigeria, récemment, on a vulgarisé une variété de maïs qui résiste à deux insectes, le fall armyworm et la foreuse de tige, et en même temps tolérante à la sécheresse. Cette variété existe. Pour le niébé, par exemple, que je connais bien aussi, il y a une variété qui a été développée qui a un cycle très court de 65 jours. Donc, à cause du cycle court, même avec une pluviométrie réduite dans le Sahel, il est possible pour les paysans d'assurer un rendement minimum. Le problème qu'on a, c'est comment avoir de la semence certifiée de qualité en quantité suffisante pour que les paysans puissent les acquérir. Donc, nous passons par les entreprises semencières que nous soutenons par la formation, mais nous butons à un problème. Ces entreprises ne sont pas capables de produire la quantité suffisante pour que les paysans puissent acquérir la semence. Et il y a une demande très forte au niveau de la semence. Le problème de ces entreprises, c'est l'accès à un minimum de fonds pour pouvoir, par exemple, ils travaillent avec ce qu'on appelle les outgrowers, et à la fin, il faut aller récupérer la semence. Alors, parce qu'il n'y a pas de fonds, ces semences-là restent très souvent avec ces outgrowers et ils finissent par les revendre sur le marché comme du grain, ce qui est une grosse perte. Et c'est vraiment un cri de cœur que je lance parce que c'est assez général dans la sous-région. Je sais que les banques font beaucoup, mais nous demandons, c'est un appel, si nous voulons vraiment atteindre la sécurité alimentaire, il faut vraiment que ces entreprises-là soient soutenus. Nous avons beau techniquement accroître leur capacité, s'il n'y a pas ce minimum-là, c'est difficile de pouvoir atteindre l'assiette suffisante en semences pour que les paysans puissent en disposer et faire face aux problèmes d'alimentation. Voilà, donc c'était mon point. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Please, let's get responses quickly, and then I'll take the second round of questions. Thank you.
I'm really sorry I didn't get the French questions because the thing didn't work, so I'm really sorry. If there was something directed to me, I would need someone to explain, but I can certainly respond to the first question, which was about the ruling out of fossil fuels in the Mission 300. And you asked for studies showing that using natural gas cannot bring development. And of course it can. So I don't think there's any studies saying that natural gas development cannot bring development, but there's lots of studies showing that developing renewables can bring more development and less corruption. It's cleaner and faster, and it doesn't exacerbate the climate problem, because this is the main problem. So the IEA scenarios, if you look at them, they say there can be no new gas fields developed if you want to stay below 1.5 degrees of warming. And I don't think I have to explain to you or anyone else what will happen if we go above this critical threshold, because then you can have development from gas projects, but then everything will be destroyed by floods and droughts. And yeah, we will face really, really horrible situations in many, many countries. So it's just obvious that this can't be the way forward. And this is why we demand that further gas is not being developed in these projects, and not by public money spent by the African Development Bank. Thank you.
Yeah.
And yeah, and you mentioned also Europe, and I think just because Europe is doing the wrong thing in buying LNG, that doesn't make it better for Africa to do the same thing. So just because, you know, Europe is still partly not going the right direction, we can't say it's better for Africa to do the same. No, we emphasize that we should be doing all that we can to help Africa leapfrog and not dive deeper into the gas area.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just to chip in into that conversation, that question asked by the gentleman and then the gentleman here, I think the issue is not that is it better or not. The issue is that Africa should not mimic the green transition happening in industrialized countries. We need to define our own ways and customize our green transition pathway, which means using the natural resources we have, but in a green fashion. The thing is that how are we going to transition from less green kind of energy sources to something that more greener? But I agree with you that we should not mimic, or we should not mirror what is happening in the industrialized countries. I mean, we're not responsible only for 4% of this thing. And then we have our own development agendas to support and deliver on. So this is something that we need to nuance. I agree with Annie, but there is a nuance there for Africa. I do believe that mimicking would not serve us the best way. Now, coming to the second question on how do we coordinate and really deliver for both the people and the countries in needs. In the MDB group where I'm sitting, you know that there's the MDB reforms and trying to this international financial architecture and all these things. We all agree that we need to change the way we do business. We need to be more nimble and agile. And this needs, there's a couple of things, 3, 4 things that we have to do if we want to really make a big dent and deliver for our people. First, we need to work in an integrated and coordinated fashion. And this is why we need platforms. And we have platforms. M300 can be one of them. We have a platform of MDBs with the World Bank. We have another platform, AIIB Plus, where we try to bring all the MDBs and partners together to work in a very orderly manner to avoid duplication, to avoid this competition that we see from here and there, and make sure that we can deliver for these people. So having a platform in place will help us really make a big dent and deliver for our people. Second, we need to really explore ways to maximize impact. And then the mission scale type of initiative like M300 are the way to go. We need to be bold on how can we really deliver energy to our people and thinking big and making sure that we coalesce together and deliver on that thing. That's the second thing. The platform, the ambition, and third, we need to make sure that we have this mutual reliance between MDBs. It doesn't make sense to me that other ISDB, I come with my own procedures, procurement, reporting, impact, the World Bank come, same thing, the EIB will come. So this is taking a toll to our client. So we need to phase that out and streamline in such a way that we build mutual reliance agreements and deliver on that side. Last but not least, technical assistance, capacity building, project preparation is not there. That's the major issue that we face in the infrastructure sector. We don't have bankable projects. We don't have resources, grants allocated to build capacity and make sure we provide technical assistance to prepare projects. I think if we do those four, I think we will be better positioned to deliver for our people.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to add my voice to respond to my brother Kenneth, I think issues of carbon credits is like the sauce that is called sweet and sour, you know? Because it's not solving the problem, you know? Because those cook stoves, I understand that 80% of most of the African countries are using biomass energy. So we need to work in the efficiency way. But now, the solution that is brought by these people who are well funded by carbon credits, they are not transferring that to the community. You buy a cook stove at $40. Who will ever afford that cook stove? My grandmother can never afford that cook stove. Yeah? So whose problem are you solving? Because you've been given money by carbon credits to solve an issue that you're not solving. So those cook stoves remain in the supermarkets. What we need is maybe AfDB in the roadmap to Baku to Belém to have a local adaptation facility that will bring technology transfer to us Africans. That technology, we can be able to retrofit these cook stoves with our own technology that we've been given and funding, because that should be there so that we can make our own cook stoves, not somebody who's been given carbon credits, puts the cook stoves there, sells the cook stoves at $40, we will never afford those cook stoves. So we need a local adaptation facility set up with technology transfer that will emancipate Africa towards a greener and future, and will be in control of our facilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I'll just take 2, at most 3, because of time, please. That side. Please be brief.
Merci, je suis Bessia Apollinaire. Je viens de la République démocratique du Congo. Je voudrais poser un peu la question sur la problématique de la transition juste, spécialement dans le cadre de grands barrages. Vous savez, dans mon pays, la Banque mondiale et la Banque africaine de développement se sont mis ensemble pour voir comment financer les grands Inga. Et en lisant les reliefs du fleuve dans la zone, on constate qu'il y aura des incertitudes qui ne seront pas financées par le banque et que c'est l'État qui doit le financer. Alors que l'État congolais a la fragilité financière, nous nous posons la question si réellement la Banque africaine de développement a réfléchi dans cette logique de la transition juste pour qui? Aussi longtemps que dans un pays fragile et que l'État n'est pas en mesure de financer les multiples inondations que nous constatons déjà aujourd'hui.
C'est pas transition juste pour qui et comment pallier aux insuffisances que les institutions financières internationales ne seront pas responsables. Merci.
Thank you so much. I'll try to make it very brief so that we can move on. I want to align myself with my name is Samuel Eredele from the African Business Roundtable. And I'm quite concerned about the issue of energy transition because Africa is always at the receiving end, given the short end of the stick. When the pollution was on, we were victims. Now when transition is also being spoken about, we are victims. So how are we going to change the narrative so that we are drivers of narrative, not just what has been cooked and placed on our table for us to take and then run away with it? Because we're looking at the AfCFTA, and we keep saying it's a game changer, but businesses know that energy, transport play a very key significant part in industrialization. And if African countries, if African entrepreneurs are not capacitated to improve their productive capacity, they will just remain mere agents and onlookers in this process again. And we know that here our development institutions are playing a very key role, and we want to see how these technologies can be adapted, and they listen more to the private sector to see what urgent need. So I won't want to take much of your time. So by tomorrow, I think in the same room between 2 and 4, we'll be looking at the role the energy and transport will play in implementation of the AfCFTA. So we want to invite AfDB and AfDB's will be there. We want to sit down. We want to know how to really help each other in order to move on. So you're invited to be there tomorrow, and then we'll continue with this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any panelist who wants to respond?
I mean, I can check the last one.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead. You didn't. I've spoken already, so.
That's fine. Thanks. Yeah, to the last question. So when I was at the I totally understand what you mean. And when I was at the Financing Commons Summit in February, there was a lot of talk about the critical minerals and how the critical minerals of Africa can be used for development. And yeah, everyone emphasized that this time it needs to be done right, and we cannot allow that it's just be mined for export and not repeat the colonial history over and over again. So, but I wasn't quite sure whether there were any really practical strategies already of how to put this in practice and actually really prevent that lots of the mining will just be for export. So I agree that this is extremely critical now with the critical minerals to set up local industrial structures for using these minerals and do the manufacturing, do the green industrialization, and that's also what I meant earlier when I talked about this topic. I saw that the African Development Bank, for example, already deploys a lot of equity financing, and I think in this regard it would be very advisable to try and scale up this equity financing for promising endeavors and corporations that are trying to set up businesses and ways how to actually manufacture and use these minerals to produce goods and not just to export. And importantly, everything that's been done with these minerals always needs to benefit the local population. So that is super important, whether it's green hydrogen projects or whether it's mineral mining. It always needs to, so those projects always needs to come with safeguards to make sure that the local population will actually benefit from these things. So that is, I think, something that should be on the forefront of every work that the AfDB's do in this regard.
Thank you. Karabo, quickly.
Hello? Oh,
yeah.
okay. I want to just speak about the DRC, comment on the DRC question, but also just starting off with the fact that it's so important for MDBs to institutionalize, to institutionalize structures and have transparent systems that incorporate civil society organizations and grassroots movements, because a lot of the just transitions requires accountability for us to not repeat a lot of the human rights violations that are going to happen, or we hope they don't happen. The assumption that just transitions and clean energy systems are without fault and harm is completely wrong. So there are systems, for example, green hydrogen projects, they do bring harm to our communities. There are large-scale projects that displace people. We still see water scarcity. So it's not that the just transition is without fault. And that's why that just component is so crucial, because like I said, we need to humanize this conversation. We need to then hold a lot of these projects accountable, and the people-centered component then is going to be a crucial part of it. The Lake Turkana Wind Power Project displaced people. We had indigenous communities struggling with the land issues. So it's not that these are without fault, but we need to make sure that they are just so that we prevent things like the flooding, the displacement, the water scarcities, that even these very solutions we are fighting for could potentially bring in our communities.
Thank you, Karabo. Ms. Jackie, can you go quickly?
Yeah, finally, I think when all is said, we need to bring the conversation around adaptation, energy transition together, and it boils down to energy for what. And one of the questions that was raised is around socioeconomic development. What we are saying is that we need to have energy as an enabler. It is not enough to have just lighting and lighting people's poverty. It is about using energy to deliver socioeconomic development needs, and that is where off-grid solutions, the DRE, come in. So when all is said and done, energy for productive use, that will, of course, transition our people to, economic gains is what we are promoting. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think that has been a very enriching conversation. Unfortunately, we are pressed on time. But before I release my panelists, I just want to give you under 1 minute quickly. What will you tell the incoming AfDB president who will be elected tomorrow? What will be your one key message? Under 1 minute, please. I can start with Ms. Jackie.
Yeah, mine is energy is an enabler of development. Let's look at it from that front.
Thank you.
Time is not on our side. We need to act and act now.
Yeah. Marry the agendas of climate and development, because only climate-compatible development will be sustainable.
Put a lens of equity when you're providing energy to Africans.
The decisions you make are not just transactions, they impact the daily lives of Africans.
I guess you all have that. Thank you very much for that conversation. I mean, it's been incredible.